All right. Hello, everyone. Once again to the second day of this great training program, Breaking Barriers, Embracing Inclusive Education in Nigerian Schools. All right. So if you're here with me, I can see that about 40 people have joined already. Yesterday, amazing program, and the turn up was great. And at the time we finished the program yesterday, we had about 1.1 thousand views. Awesome. So if you're joining us today and you were here yesterday, just say hello. I was here yesterday, and I want to see you in the chat room. Hi, Juliet. Scholastica Emedio form. Hello, Onyedikachi, Isiwu, Florence Ada, Silva Ada. Okay, Nne Naume. Hello, okay, you were here yesterday. Awesome. Great. So, what one thing did you actually learn yesterday? Just one thing that you learned yesterday. And if you didn't come yesterday, just say hello. I missed yesterday, and we'll just say sorry. We'll say sorry because you missed a lot. However, if you missed yesterday's class, it's recorded. It's on my YouTube page. Please go and watch it because we won't repeat all that again today. So we have a lot of things lined up for you today. We're going to start from our friends from British Council. They will be here very soon. We'll also have a session with Adelola. Adelola took the class yesterday on behavior management, autism, so if you have questions surrounding children, on the autism spectrum, hi, Eniola Juliet. She said, hello, Bukola. Hi. No, that's Enoja, not Eniola. Don't mind me. So if you have any questions surrounding tips on inclusion in the classroom, autism, children with autism in the classroom, behavior management, please, once Deola is about to come up, put your questions in the comment and she's going to answer all the questions or all the questions within her time frame in the comment section. So she took topics on the common type of special education needs and disability we'll find in the classroom, making the classroom inclusive. She spoke about behavior management and positive reinforcement. So if you have questions around the area that Adelola touched yesterday, as soon as she's about to come up, which I would announce, you can drop your questions in the comment section. So Andrew Oluchi said, hello, my tutor. Hi, my student. Okay, so just a quick recap of what I spoke about yesterday. Very quick recap. We spoke about meaning of inclusive education, the benefits of inclusive education, not just to children with disability, but all students and even to the teacher in the classroom. We spoke about legal framework, and someone reached out to me and said, oh, she thought, inclusive education was just a positive vibe, but I saw it from the legal angle within the Nigerian policies and laws. Then we spoke about the barriers to inclusive education. We have to be realistic. Even though we want to do inclusion, we have to understand the barriers. We can walk around the barriers and make it possible for students to learn without barriers. And yesterday, I also asked us for as many people are interested, because this is just an introduction to the topic. There's still so many things to learn, and we can't do that in a class. It has to be in a smaller class on Zoom. And I advertised a 3-day virtual training for teachers, inclusive education in practice, tools for education. So if you're interested in that, send me an email at diaryofaSNNI@gmail.com. All right. And another training that I advertised yesterday was inclusive education, understanding inclusive education, a parent's role. Like I said yesterday, inclusive education is collabo. Is a collaboration between all the stakeholders, the school owners, the school board, the teacher, the students, and the parents, and the community in general. So a parent has a role to play for inclusive education to be successful. So if you're a parent here or you're a school owner who knows parents who have children with disability, this is a good training. And if you can see, is in May, so it will be on my Instagram and Facebook pages. That's Bukola Ayinde, BT Ayinde, or Diary of a Special Needs Mom on Instagram and Facebook. I mean, watch out for it. Send me an email. I'll send you all the details. Okay, and I don't want to take our time. I will go right into what we have for today so that we can finish early and enjoy our weekend. Okay. So let me bring up our first for today. Now let me look for my interpreter. Oh my God, she's been here. Hello, welcome, Dockers. Awesome, awesome. And to the deaf community, we got you. We got you. So, Dockers, yeah. So let me bring up Eddie. Hello,
Hello,
Eddie.
hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Let me just tell them who you are so that we can go straight into the matter.
Okay.
Okay, Eddie is the head of English and School Education Program Marketing Global in British Council. And the very first time I met Eddie was the very first edition of Connecting Classrooms on Inclusive Education, in Nigeria. So I think someone's okay. Let me mute. Um, Dorcas, is that your system? Something okay. I think it's I think Eddie. Okay. Eddie, are you using earphones?
No, I'm not. Is it
Okay,
echoing?
yeah, like some, but we'll make do with that. And she was in the very first edition of the Connecting Classrooms, inclusive education that was organized by British Council. So she has this long history, so passionate about inclusive education. So we're going to hand it over to Eddie now as I put on her slide and she takes over.
Thank you very much, Bukola. I'm very excited to be here. I listened to I think most of the conversations yesterday, and I thought what you're doing is just phenomenal. Particularly in this space, we so need the conversation to continue. We want the conversation to be engaging, and I think you did just that yesterday. So I'm really excited to be here. I have bigger experts that are coming after me on the space of inclusive education, but I'll just be speaking from my own experience and just exposure to the world of inclusive education in the last couple of years working at the British Council. Like Bukola said, if you want to connect with me, I'm Idemekong Uyo. Everyone calls me Eddie. So please feel very free to call me Eddie and look up for me on my LinkedIn channel where you most likely find me. So I'll go straight into the presentation. So Bukola said I should talk a bit around the importance of disability inclusion in Africa, looking particularly at lessons from other African countries. I think one of the key challenges we've had with disability inclusion is We all don't want to make a mistake, so people rather stay away or step back from learning about disability inclusion. We have concerns around what are the right namings, what are the right things to say, are we saying it right? I think more importantly than getting it right is making an attempt to be part of the conversation. Bukola, I was just in a session 2 days ago where we're talking about disability inclusion in the workplace, particularly with women, and looking at women in the tech space as well. And I remember in that conversation, one of the panelists flagged with us that we were all speaking very fast, and it would be very difficult for the sign language interpreter to catch up. And for someone who speaks very fast, I'm going to make an attempt today to be slower so that the sign language interpreter can pick up on the signs. Why is this important? If the person did not speak up, the rest of us will not learn. And that's why it's important to continue having these conversations. They're so critical. So generally, what's disability inclusion? It's ensuring that people with disabilities have equal opportunities in all aspects of society. And that's something that's absolutely important. Removing barriers and promoting participation. So encouraging people from different opportunities, walks of life, to integrate successfully and actively in society. And that starts with inclusive education, particularly for very young people. There are a few definitions that have gone around disability inclusion, and one of the ones I want to highlight is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and that one looks at disability inclusion as understanding the relationship between the way people function and how they participate in society, and making sure everybody has the same opportunities to participate in every aspect of life to the best of their abilities. We all have something that we're not so great at, and we all have something that we are really great at. The idea is, how do we ensure that as much as possible, we're giving everyone access to opportunities to live their best life? I think that's what this whole drive is. As a parent, and why I think inclusion should be everybody's business, as a parent, every parent wants their child to feel valued, to feel loved, to feel supported, to feel like they have a sense of belonging. And even if they do have a disability, that shouldn't negate that right to acceptance, right to feel valued and loved. That should be a basic right. Now, we know that, from Cola's presentation yesterday and all the other lovely speakers from yesterday, there are challenges. We can't undermine the challenges within the whole inclusion space. A lot of it is around, and I'll be speaking a lot more around social stigma, isolation, and discrimination. And that's something that has to do with our community. A lot of times when people do not understand something, the easy thing to do, the easy fix, is to try and fill in the gaps for things they don't understand, sometimes through things that are not facts. As a very religious community, I've walked across Africa in the last couple of years, and I've realized that it's not just a Nigerian problem, it is an African problem, where people, because we're very religious people, we tend to have all these myths and assumptions around disability. So first and foremost, if you know and you learn something new today, I would implore you to please share it within your community, to let them know that, see, having a disability is just one of those things, and what we are doing to help disabuse people's minds from negative stereotypes that are attached to disability. One of the other key challenges that the people living with disability face that affects their ability to be included in education is obviously lack of access. Access to buildings, physical infrastructure, the fact that a lot of teachers don't understand what it takes to work with people living with disabilities, don't know how to help. So people just avoid the problem instead of trying to see how they can support and address that challenge. Inadequate healthcare and rehabilitation services. I've had a series of conversations with parents of children living with disabilities, and one of the key concerns has been the financial implication. So all the investments they need to make to support that child. And that's a major challenge, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa. Low political representation and weak policy enforcement. So when people break the law, when people discriminate against children living with disabilities or people living with disabilities, what's the consequence? We all know that where there are no consequences, people struggle, struggle to adhere to those laws. So this is an opportunity to call on to government, legislature, to please look at implementing, and defending those policies that they've nicely put together. In conversations that we've had, we know Nigeria has rich amount of policies. The challenge over the years has been implementation. So that's something that we are calling everyone. It's everyone's business. Now the question is, why is this important? Why is disability inclusion important? Looking at the statistics, we're looking at the World Health Organization has given us some numbers. They've said over 1 billion people globally have some form of disability. Can you imagine that? Over 1 billion people. And looking at what that accounts for the world's population, that's looking at about 15% of the world's population. Bukola, I've moved slides, if that's okay. So applying the percentage to Africa's population, it's so important. If you think about 15% of the African population, we're looking at about 211 million people. That's a lot of people. In December 2023, the National Commission for Persons Living with Disabilities, the commission that was set up by the last administration, reported that approximately 35.1 million Nigerians have disabilities. Those are not small numbers. Those are big numbers, meaning that we all know someone who has a disability. Now, it's important to note at this point that a lot of these numbers are underreported because I heard Bukola make the joke yesterday about people sending her as NSPPD prayer altar prayers. While prayers are very important, I'm also Christian and believe a lot in miracles. We also give an opportunity for God to use whatever approach He's going to use to solve and support that particular child. So sometimes it's a miracle, divine complete healing. Sometimes it's the ability of the child to navigate in spite of that challenge, what their purpose and future is. A lot of factors affect influence underreporting in disability, trying to get data around disability. One of it is stigma and discrimination. So looking at cultural and religious beliefs, like I just mentioned, there's social exclusion. That's also a major reason why people don't talk about it. I've had situations where you have children living with disabilities that are locked up in rooms where no one ever gets to see them. They're just fed by their parents and kept in that room. So exclusion is one of the key stigmas that that affects the reporting of people living with disabilities. We also have concerns around negative attitudes, lack of awareness and understanding, weak data collection system, so people not even being able to recognize that what that child is going through is a disability. I remember going to school here in Nigeria and having children called Olodo in school. It's in later years, while I've gotten exposed to people living with disabilities, that I've realized that sometimes some of those challenges that those children have are based on disabilities that they do have, particularly the invincible ones. So invincible disabilities are sometimes people don't even have the capacity, knowledge to be able to diagnose those disabilities, and as such, the children end up not even being able to be supported because people are not able to diagnose those disabilities. So disability, lack of awareness and understanding is a critical one. The reason why, as a community, if you're on this call, you do have a responsibility to go back to your immediate community to tell them and share with them what you have learned through the 2 days conversations, what you have learned, what's the new thing that you can bring to the table. Because the more we get the awareness going, the more people the stigma will hopefully reduce and we'll be able to influence culture. The more we get more people talking about disability and the different types that exist. We also have a lot of challenges with political policies, institutional barriers, and self-reporting. A lot of people psychologically have that barrier that, I'm blocking my ears, I don't have that disability, or wishing it away. In the session I was in about 2 days ago, where we're talking to young women who also live with disabilities and thinking of how they can move into the workspace. One of the ladies that I had a chance to speak to um, was not born blind, got ill, and then lost her sight. That lady said it took about 10 years to accept the fact that she had lost her sight. About 10 years to decide to do something with her life beyond just moaning about her condition. And that's completely understandable, especially when you're in a very judgmental society like we live in. So we have a responsibility to teach people and, encourage people to share their stories about how they've navigated their disability, such a way to inspire other people who probably haven't had that experience before and kind of feel like this is a hopeless situation. The key context in select African countries where disability has been looked at as a whole. The World Bank Group in 2021 had a whole disability data research work done in some African countries, including Nigeria, Botswana, Gabon, Lesotho, Namibia. And when they did through these different African countries, they came up with key pointers as to what contributes, what are the key challenges that are associated with disability in Africa. And they came up with some really interesting data. They came up with the fact that disability rates are higher in rural areas. So we know that most people in rural areas have a challenge accessing, stepping out and actually accessing healthcare that could have probably prevented the disability or helped address it in the early stages. A lot of times it's financial. They don't have money to get to the hospital. So that becomes a permanent disability. They also pointed out that women experience higher rates of disability than men. And this one I was particularly curious about because I wanted to find out why is it that more women experience disability than men in these African countries that were surveyed. And the key pointers were around pregnancy, making women predisposed to medical conditions that could affect their health. Another key one is women being deprioritized over men. So parents that have very limited financial resources now need to make a decision about whose health to prioritize. And they think, well, the woman is going to go and get married and leave our family, so let's prioritize the men, which is quite an unfortunate situation, thinking about the women in Africa. And there's also a lot of conversation as well around domestic violence and the impacts that it has on women and the likelihood to lead to disability, which I say really, really sad statistics, but that's what we have on the ground. Older people also report more disabilities. That was another key finding from that research. And persons with disabilities have lower level of educational attainment. And that's just because many times, even when they are interested in pursuing education or their parents or guardians are, teachers don't know what to do with them. So they just avoid, and send them back. Another key driver is participation in the labor market, which is a very a very realistic trend at the moment, where people with disability, when they even go ahead and get skills or go through education, they do not get employment. And even when they do, they are lower paid than their contemporaries that are doing the same job. And that's something that we must address. The British Council is very particular about giving opportunities and access to people living with disabilities. One of our HR policies is that when you apply to any of our roles, when they're advertised and you're living with a disability and you indicate same, immediately you move from the initial application process directly to the interview. So you skip a few steps of the shortlisting process. And that's just our way of saying that people living with disabilities are welcome in our organization, and then also an opportunity for them to also showcase their skills, as many times, unfortunately, they do not get a chance to even build on skills. Now, around country policies, there are loads of policies in Nigeria. I think the most recent one has been the setup of the National Commission for Persons Living with Disabilities, and that one was established in 2020 to prevent the discrimination against persons with disabilities and to give them equal rights and opportunities. The key functions of that agency has been advising the government on policies, promoting public awareness of the rights of persons living with disability, ensuring that the government, programs and services are accessible to people living with disabilities, providing support services and assistance to persons living with disabilities, conducting research, and collecting data on the needs and experiences of people living with disabilities, monitoring and enforcement, which is something which is a part that still needs a lot of support to be able to implement, and that's something that we're big on supporting as well. And then also collaborating with government agencies, civil society organizations to promote inclusion. Now, one of the critical things, now that we know what the policies are, we've seen the context, these numbers are staggering. What then do we do to enhance inclusive education in our schools? My colleague Chatao, who will be joining the call later in the day, will be talking about the technical bits of how British Council is supported. But from a marketing lens, one of the key things I've realized around inclusive education is starting with a step, just making that first step forward. I came across this very interesting case study I thought to share in this call. It is very relevant, about a Zambian head teacher, Mr. Malumbe, who enrolled a 17-year-old student in his school, public school, and just because the students couldn't afford to go to a special school, which was what was recommended, this child, Mpaso, had autism and experienced hypersalivation as part of the symptoms of the condition that he had, and was denied admission in schools because people just thought, well, he probably won't be able to learn. And for over 2 years, a single mother tried to get him in school, and this principal just decided that he was going to put him in his school. His medical condition, coupled with the family's low socioeconomic status, meant that his caregiver, who's his mother, had no other means of supporting him except, just holding on to him because she didn't have anything else to do. And this head teacher decided that he was going to take up this case. What did he do? Very similar to Bukola's story yesterday. This head teacher said, you know what, you're going to come in and join our class. And when he did join the class, the boy built his own self-confidence. And what the teacher was able to say was that the family, before this boy joined this class, had very low self-esteem. But after he joined, the family was able to build on the skills of this boy, and he was able to learn, building his confidence, his personal motivation, and then just building his resilient spirit in learning. And that took one person's decision, a head teacher's decision, to say, you know what, this boy is going to learn, and he's going to learn in my class. And that's something that's happened in Zambia. I'm sure we have so many other stories of similar situations in Nigeria and in other countries where people have taken up that decision. What does that tell me? It means that we are all heroes in the story. It takes one person making a decision and taking a step and not turning that child away, and then giving that child a chance. We've heard countless of times Bukola share her story with her daughter, and that's an example of just taking the bull by the horns and saying, you know what, I'm going to be interested. I think one of the things that this, really resonated with this man's story was the fact that beyond him supporting the son and ensuring that the boy was in school, the mother, who's a primary caregiver, was now able to go and do some kind of petty trade while the child was in school. We know the financial implication of taking care of a child with disability, and the mother was able to take that child and then go to drop the child off in school and then go and earn some income, which was important to the family's socioeconomic status. It was also important, to think through the fact that this man broke the policies, because policies will send him to a special education school and the boy will be fine. But what he did was he simply by being brave and making that decision, that one step, he was able to get that child in school. And that's something I'm imploring all of us on the call, including myself. Where we do have an opportunity to make an impact, to change someone's life, to give an opportunity to someone who is living with a disability, then we absolutely need to take it. Take it and take that risk on that child. So the question is, when we support these children with inclusive education, who are we trying to reach? Well, I have a few examples of people who are living with disabilities who have particularly thrived. I'm going to start off with a Nigerian example, Kobam Sasoko. Most of us know him. He's visually impaired. Kobam has gone ahead to be one of the biggest producers, songwriters, music minstrels in Nigeria. And that's something he's able to do and achieve and be a prominent force in the entertainment space in Nigeria, simply because, I'd like to say that again, simply because he took a risk. His parents took a risk on him, and we've seen how that has paid off. Cobbams has said, in his words, I learned early on that my blindness is not a limitation. It's an opportunity to see the world differently. And that's something that I want us to take away with us after this 2 days, intense sessions that Bukola has prepared for us. That if we give that child a chance in an inclusive school where they can interact and build their own social skills, we'll get a chance to produce, hopefully, many more Cobbams supporters across the continent. The other bit that I also want to mention, the other case study that I'm particularly very inspired by is Farida Bedway's story. Farida is from Ghana, and Farida is she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, and at age 1, and has been living with the condition. But in spite of that, she has gone on to co-found Logisol Ghana Limited. She's gone on to work in Microsoft's Metaverse platform. She has gone on to build banking platforms for the microfinance sector, in spite of her condition. What Farida's also done is she's been quoted as creating, she's been quoted as saying that she's built characters, that she's done superhero characters that have cerebral palsy to represent that community. And I think that's brilliant, because one of the things that's also happened with disabilities, because people hide them, people away, people don't realize just how many people are living with disabilities. Farida has written a children's book where she's highlighted cerebral palsy, following her own condition and her experiences in Ghana. And, I love this quote from Farida where she said, I'm a role model for a lot of children with disabilities, and it's important for me to showcase to the world that, yes, you can have a disabled child and it's not the end of the world. There's so much that that child can end up doing given the right resources. And this, for me, just speaks to fearlessness. The fact that Farida has been able to achieve this, in spite of, a seeming disability. And, and her ability to also use particularly her strengths. And the last one I'm going to go to is Shamel Abdullah. I can see Bukola giving me the signal. Shamel is one of those stories I'm particularly very passionate about. Shamel came to join the British Council as a staff in Sudan. She's also visually impaired. And Shamel, from being a staff of British Council, got an opportunity to go to London School of Economics, studied and won awards there, graduated with a distinction, and has now gotten a permanent opportunity at the British Council in our London office to run our Alumni UK product. And when Shamal was getting the opportunity as an intern at the British Council, one of the main things that we had asked, I'm friends with her line manager, and one of the things he said was, I didn't know how I was going to cope with a staff who was visually impaired, but I took a risk. And the fact that he took a risk, we can see the results now. And that's something I'm encouraging all of us on this call to do. I'm going to end with key recommendations. We need leadership and commitment at the school level that can drive inclusion. all of us have a stake to play. As I said, it's all of us to do this together. We need inclusion. We need to adopt and enforce some inclusive policies. We all need to be a voice for that. I particularly love this the recent Milo commercial. As I'm in marketing, obviously I had to bring in the marketing element, where Milo is making the hero of its campaign a boy living with disabilities, and the boy is the champion. He's living his life. And that's something we want to see more brands take advantage of, where there's representation for people living with disabilities. Bukola, because I know time is up, I'm just going to quickly end with this quote. We are all just temporarily able-bodied. Disability is a natural part of the human experience that we may all encounter at some point in our lives. This was so true for me about 3 years ago, when I was trying to read the label of a drug I had purchased. And then for some reason, it suddenly looked like the prints were too tiny. And then I complained to the pharmacist. And then I had my husband quickly say, Eddie, actually, it's your eyes, is not the prints. It didn't go smaller. Your eyes got worse. And that's sign of age. And that's something that's going to happen to all of us at some point. So it's important that we start doing what we need to do now to make sure that people living with disabilities are included, so that by the time it gets to our turn, we would have set up a space that we are all ready to fit into. Thank you so much, Bukola, for the opportunity. I hand right back to you.
Thank you so much, Eddie. That was awesome. Awesome. So much to learn. So many things to learn. And I have put her name in the section, Eddie Mekong Puyo. Please follow her on LinkedIn so that you can see the amazing things that she's doing. I mean, speaking up, not just for persons with disability in British Council, but doing amazing work all over Africa. And what's the one thing that I've learned from what Eddie has said this evening? I mean, she said so many things. For me, is the fact that the challenges we're facing in Nigeria is not peculiar to Nigeria alone, other African countries. When I speak to mothers, yeah, when I speak to mothers in Ghana, and Nairobi, Namibia, all the and the other African countries, it's the same thing, the same complaints, the stigma, the lack of facilities, the government is not helping enough, intensive therapies, education, discrimination. So it's the same thing. However, we shouldn't say it's a black man's thing, and we shouldn't say because it is common we should not do anything about it. So we shouldn't give up, right? When we should keep advocating. One thing I'm also taking away from what Eddie has said is that all of us, not just Bukola Inde, not just Eddie, should speak up for persons with disability. All of us should speak up for persons with disability, whether in the school, in the religious centers, in the other parts of the community. Let's speak up. Let's make a change. Thank you, Eddie, for coming today and adding your voice. God bless you.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, so I promise I will move fast today. And the next person to come up stage is Adelola Edema George. She was here yesterday and she spoke about the common types of special education needs and disabilities that we can see in the classroom, making a classroom inclusive. She spoke about behavior management and positive reinforcement. So as I'm bringing her up stage, if you have any question relating to what she said yesterday, please put it in the comment section right away so that she can see it. Put it in the comment section.
Hello, good evening.
Adelola, you're muted. All right.
I realized that quite late. Good evening.
Your volume is very low.
Ah, let me change.
Yes, so thank you for appreciating our speakers. Wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Ma. Okay, someone said thanks for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much, Mrs. Edemekongu. You're very interested. All right, Eddie, let's hear your voice. Adelola, let's hear your voice. So if you have questions from, yesterday's class, you want to know, more about children with autism in the classroom, inclusive education, inclusive tips on how to run an inclusive classroom, please put your questions in the comment section and Adela will answer them. You're muted, Adelola.
Me, I'm this muted, I'm muted. But so you can hear me now, right? No one that was shouting, can you hear me? And there was no response.
All right. So we can
All
hear
right.
you.
All right, amazing. While we wait for questions, I'm going to share two stories, and they are not. One is about inclusion, but one is not particularly about inclusion, but it's about playing your role or maybe giving yourself an opportunity. Let me put it like that. So yesterday, I remembered a story about. I used to work in a school. I say that I worked in a number of schools, but I used to work in a British school, and at some point, I worked in the boarding house. It was a short term. Uh, in fact, when they asked me to work in boarding house, I was like, no. I mean, it wasn't something I wanted to do, but because there was nobody else around us that could take that role at the time, I took it. And Eddie's story today about the principal in Zambia, I think, confirms for me. I mean, reminds me again of this story in I took that job, and one of the things I had to do was get a girl for practice. I don't think it was every morning, but I think 3 mornings in the week or 4 mornings in the week for athletics practice. Every morning, 5 a.m. I mean, it meant I had to wake up earlier than 5 a.m. so that I could get her for practice by 5 a.m. And I would have had my bath, dressed up for the day, then get her for practice, come back to wake up the other children. It was it was hectic. It wasn't it wasn't my strong point, but one of the things that happened was that I bonded with that particular child. But here's the beauty of the story that I remembered yesterday. The girl was going for athletics practice and swimming practice 5 days a week, yes. Swimming 2 days, athletics 3 days, every morning. And she was preparing for what they call World School Games. She went for the games much later. And not only did she win so many medals that the school came first in the World School Games, the girl actually beat the standing record twice. Like she beat the one of the races she did, she beat the record that was existing, and then she ran the race again and beat the record again. So she won an award for beating record twice in one event. And I remember when they announced it, I said to her, I mean, by this time we had now built a relationship because, yeah, I had now worked in boarding house. I said to her that I said to her, I said, I feel like I'm a part of your success story. And I am. I was. Even if she never mentions me in her life about the lady that had to take her at 5 a.m. I mean, she ever tells that story and just talks about how she had to get to practice at 5 a.m. every morning. And she doesn't talk about the lady that had to get her to practice at 5 a.m. every morning. I know that I got her to practice 5 a.m. every morning, and I am part of her success story, you know. And why is that story important to me and to us tonight? That's principle that Eddie talked about is part of, I mean, whatever success story this autistic child is gonna have, that teacher is that principal is going to be part of that success story. So my question to you today is, are you going to be part of someone's success story? If there's a child in your class, will you be part of that child's success story? And the children in your class at large, we could be part of that story, like Richard, which is the second story. Richard Branson talks about how I think his principal said to him that you're either going to end up in jail or you'll be successful or something. And basically, Richard Branson is successful. He's the owner of Virgin Atlantic. So, are you going to be part? What role will you play in that child's success story? I'm telling this story while I wait for questions. I am not seeing any question in the comment section. So I'm wondering if we do not have questions about inclusion,
Sorry,
about
there's a question. Let me read out. How can we plan a lesson to meet the needs of all the diverse learners in the classroom?
ah my first okay. How come I didn't see this one? I've seen it now. Choma Olga. My first answer to that question is please join the training in April because you will definitely learn that in depth. However, I'm going to give you a brief overview because in the training in April, I might be able to I might have more time to explain it in total, like what differentiation looks like. So there's this term called differentiation. You could check it online. It's everywhere. The advantage I have over online is that if I have an experience of it. I've partnered with teachers to differentiate their lessons in order to meet the needs of children with special needs in their classroom, right? So being in that training in April will be me planning with you a lesson. But basically, the first thing to know when differentiating is that there are different learning styles. And I could ask for, I'm short of time, I mean, I'm scared for time, or I'm pressed for time. But if people, while I'm talking, can put what they know about learning styles in the chat, I will be glad because I mean, it means that I'm going to be building on what you already know. So there are different learning styles. So some people they learn the auditory learners is by what they hear. Some people are visual learners. Some are kinesthetic learners, and of course, there's multiple intelligence, which means that so some they are tactile, they need to touch. Some require movement to be able to learn. So, and that's why we have practical sessions. You find people learning more during practicals than they do in just general learning. Some children will learn with pictures and videos, you know. So some basically that, and then some people is what they hear that helps them. Now, understanding this will make you plan your lesson. Sorry, 1 second. Let me mute. All right, I'm back. That was it was my phone rang and I had to stop it. All right, so basically, that understanding that there are different learning styles means that you're going to plan with those learning styles in mind. So if you are teaching algebra, how are you going to meet the needs of a child who needs to see videos or see pictures or see images? You are teaching how is there going to be movement? How is there something to touch? How is there something to touch? And the interesting thing that these things exist in education. I remember doing a course in my 100 level that had to do with learning aids or something like that, learning materials. I remember it very well because my teacher brought in a Maltina bottle for one of the lessons. So, and he was telling us, and one of the things we had to show during teaching practice and during teaching practice observation, micro teaching was evidence that we were engaging all learners. And now that's one way that differentiation, first of all, takes place. And then the next place is to look at multi-level teaching, where you explore this is what every the by understanding your children, the children in your class, this is at the minimum what one child will go away with. And of course, there's the broad vision. So you break things down. This is wide. But basically, that's what differentiation looks like. So you differentiate instruction. This is what you are teaching, how you teach, the content of your teaching. You differentiate the content, and then you differentiate products, how you assess their learning. Assessing learning can look like breaking it down. So some children are answering less questions than the others. I mean, you want to extend for those who can do more questions. A child in your class can do 10 questions. Another child can do 2 questions. It doesn't matter as long as they are showing that they are learning in your lesson. The second thing that would happen is, I mean, like I mentioned yesterday, you could ask someone to do a poster. You could ask someone to write a poem. You could write someone that poster will involve drawing. You can ask someone to sing. For example, one way of of differentiation, honestly, I still remember Avogadro's law till today, which I learned in the 90s because there was a song about it. I remember the 20 elements, the first 20 elements, because there was a song about it. So that's what differentiation is. So I'm going to run along. I can see more questions have started to drop. Oh, someone said, please, do you mean that these disabled children should be mixed up with the ones that are not disabled? I think there should be distractions from them, because what do you say about it? All right, that's exactly what this whole conversation is about. We are talking about inclusion. Inclusion means that children with disabilities and those without disabilities are learning in the same room. That's what inclusion actually means. And no, it doesn't cause distraction. Your seating arrangement would help. Your seating arrangement does not mean segregation, actually. Um, your yesterday, I mean, if you can watch yesterday's session on this YouTube channel, yesterday's session is there. I talked about how you can model appropriate behavior. The way you react to the children with disabilities is exactly how the typical ones are going to, those without disabilities will react to them. So, I mean, watch yesterday's session if you can. That's what we talked about yesterday. But if you have more questions, please send. But that's what it means. There won't be, I mean, I work in that setting. Yes, I mean, let me mention this. I work with autistic kids, right? And there are times when some autistic children will have certain behaviors that require that means that maybe have some certain level of distraction. Your classroom management and behavior management skills will then come into play. And sometimes they have the SEN teacher might have to work with them. I work as sometimes I've provided facilitation jobs. I mean, that's like shadowing, sitting with a child, co-teaching. There are many ways to actually, we are talking. So join us in April as we talk about this. One more question I saw earlier that dropped. I even think before this one. In a class where we have exceptional learners and we also have learners with disability, so how can we create a lesson plan that will suit the both? I mean, I already mentioned about children can do some can do more questions than some people. And let me mention the fact that somebody has special needs does not mean that they are not geniuses or that they are not. I told about twice exceptional yesterday. I worked with a child who is dyslexic and will be considered a genius. Brilliant, whatever, best in his class. In fact, I have worked with many children best in their classes and they have special needs. I worked with an autistic child who was the spelling bee champion in the school. So for him, his accommodation was helping him to manage in group tasks, helping him to complete his task. He had to be able to plan himself to complete his task. I think this is one reason you have to come for the training in April, because we might be able to look at specific things. For example, looking at things like executive functioning, the limitations that each disability might actually present, which you need to address in your class. I hope this answers your question. All right, I'm trying to check for one. Oh, I love this question. Oh, I5 first cheer me. Inclusion sounds nice. How do I become certified SEND teacher? Let me tell you, the primary way is actually to go and study it in the university. That's the primary way. And that's what I would mention here, because it's a live, it's a broadcasted event. But if you do send me a message on social media, I'm Adelola George, on Instagram, Adela Edema George on all social, Adelola Edema George on all social media, but Adelola George is probably what you find the most. But the University of Ibadan definitely has a master's in special education beyond just the first degree. And yes, you can go there. There's also NCE. I mean, you can get a diploma, and there are other bodies that they are not. And the reason why I'm saying that there are other options is that there are other bodies, educational institutions that provide diploma courses in special education so that you can practice as a special needs educator. I hope that helps you. Oh, thank you, Choma Oga, for answering me. You have kinesthetic learners, read and write, audio learners, visual learners. Thank you so much. Okay, I need to run off now, but I might come back before the end, and if there are more questions and there's still time, I will answer at that time. Thank you so much. I hope I've gone through all the questions that are on ground at the moment. I hope so. Miss Sainde,
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much, Adelola. Okay, so we release you for your Instagram live now, but don't forget to join us when you finish in case there are
I
more
will
questions because I'm seeing questions, coming in. Someone
coming
said,
back. Yes, I will join back. I'll be done by 8:45,
yes,
and I'll come
my
back.
question is
Thank you
what can
so
a
much.
teacher do to a child who is not
I'll come
regular
back.
in school? So we'll have you back. All right, bye for now, and thank you once again. Okay, we're moving on, and we're moving on very fast, very, very fast. Yesterday during my presentation, I mentioned that we have the in the legal framework of inclusive education in Nigeria that I was there when they inaugurated the committee that put together the Nigerian policy on inclusive education. So I'm bringing on right now a key person in that committee to who is also a friend from British Council to talk more on policy and every other thing that British Council is doing as regards inclusive education. If there's one corporation, organization who is actually at the forefront of speaking about, pushing, promoting inclusive education in Nigeria and other African countries, it is the British Council. And if there's one on that stage, it is Jatal John. So, who is Jatal John? He is currently serving as a program manager, English and School Education Program in Nigeria, in British Council, and he's leading policy strengthening and implementation in Nigeria. Some of the policy strengthening includes supporting the Federal Ministry of Education in the development and implementation of the inclusive education policy, supporting the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria in developing the school leadership professional standard. So, Jatal, over to you. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. Confirm you can hear me, please. Okay, can you hear me? All right, I guess so. So if you can hear me, kindly
Yes,
share my slides, please.
we can hear you. I'm trying to share your slides now. Thank you. Let me go.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. I sincere apologies. I traveled for work outside yesterday, and I had multiple of challenges with the internet. That accounts for my inability to actually join now. I hope there's improvement this evening. And even though I didn't join yesterday, I think one thing I did was to follow the conversation very, very closely, and a lot has been said. And I feel this evening, 85% of what I'm supposed to do has been well covered. However, I will try to just scan through my presentation. A lot of the items here will just be brushed, and without dwelling more there, so that I would not be repeating myself or what has been said earlier on. Thank you, Bukola, for the privilege. I really appreciate that. And your passion above all is what is very, very important for me here. So, first slide, I will start with this. Inclusion is more than a seat at the table. Of course, it's very important that as practitioner, we should get that fact sorted even before we start anything about inclusion. Of course, we know there are three major items there. We have diversity, we have inclusion, and also we have belonging. Now, these three are very, very critical, and they feed into the three what I call inclusive rights. So there are three rights which are enshrined by the SDG goals, and for any inclusion to be achieved, this right must be attained, must be achieved. Before this, I'm not yet there, Bukola. One of the right is right to education. Right to education. Under right to education, we are talking about access, which is a fundamental right, of course. Access, enrollment, and also retention. All these falls under the topic right to education. But it's not enough to provide access to education for a child. It's not even enough to enroll he or her. It's not even enough to ensure that the child stays. The second right, of course, is learning, right to learn. That is where people talk about a lot of things like equity, in a nutshell, inclusivity. So when you have those kids in the classroom, are they really learning? So you have to think about what constitute their learning needs, what also, what other methods, like someone just asked, what methods can I actually address these needs? That, of course, speak to what I talked about. Inclusion is also having a voice. So that child voice should matter. That child voice, which represents his learning needs, of course, should matter in the planning and every other thing. Then the third right is the right to progress. Right to progress is the ultimate, because this looks at the learning outcome. It's a comparison between when the child actually started and at a specific period of time, maybe at the end of either quarterly or at the end of each academic year. So when we talk about right to progress, it also somehow speaks to belonging. Belonging is that was being had. The child feeling, yes, I belong here. The child feeling, yes, I belong to this community. I am accepted, and so forth and so on. Next slide, please. So on the next slide is just a question, and I want you please to look at it. This is how I'm going to handle the whole of this presentation, and I hope I will spend less than the time allocated for this. Look at this quote and respond. All students can learn and succeed, but not in the same way and not in the same day. All students can learn and succeed, but not in the same way and not in the same day. What I want you to talk about, if you can drop your message on the chat, what is the initial reaction to the quote? Do you agree with it, disagree, or you're not sure? Secondly, I want you to also look at it. How have you seen this play out in your personal or professional and even educational life? The third thing I want you to consider is that teacher. You can go back to when you started your school. Think about the teacher you had, that you had this connection with. Can you think about the action they did that built that connection? These three things are very, very important. I will come back to it maybe when I have the answers on the slides. Now move to the next slide, and I don't intend to stay long there because we've had this severally through the various speakers that spoke before me yesterday and even now. Equity, what equity is, diversity. I love this diversity. Diversity is very, very key, and most time is what is lacking. That's the missing link in what we do. You know, you have to be constantly and you have to be deliberately and consistently. Consistently is key. Recognizing that and valuing the differences in your classroom. It should start from the way you plan your lesson down to the way you deliver it, even down to the way you do assessment. Someone asked, the last speaker talks about differentiation. Now there's also differentiation in assessment. So you don't have to use a rule of thumb in the assessment process. Looking at their various needs, you have to factor in the best means and medium to assess these learners under you at every point in time. Inclusion, of course, we know that belonging, I've taken time to explain what that is. That is making one feel valued, accepted, celebrated for who they are, irrespective of how they look, their economic status, their social strata, uh, whether they have disability or not. It is very important that we also think about that as a teacher, think about that as a school leader, and it will be good. Next slide, please. The next slide is a picture. Now, if you look at this picture, what comes to your mind? Again, short of time, I will not, I'm not even seeing the responses anyway. But for short of time, you can drop it there. What comes to your mind? Is this, looking at this, is this equity, diversity, inclusion, or belonging? Very critical question we need to answer. Now, from the word go, we have lion there, and the lion is not looking or making an attempt to turn the zebra into its lunch or dinner. Everybody feel belonging. Everybody feel I belong here. Everybody feel I matter. That, of course, is what we are looking for in our classroom every point in time. Let no child feel disadvantaged. Let no child feel low self-esteem because of his condition, etc. And let no child feel that I am a slow learner, which is the common trend in our schools. I seriously say this anywhere I go. There is no child that does not have the ability to learn, but there are teachers who have deficiency in their ability to impart this knowledge on these children that are sitting or listening to them while the learning and teaching process is going on. Next slide. So there are various pillars. I am not sure whether this has been touched on, and which will lead me to what we've been doing so far, of course. So in terms of policy, how are the policies? Are they engendering inclusion? The teaching practice is very important. Now, most time people rely on policies and forgetting about their practice. Infrastructure, societal and community values. No matter how inclusive minded you are, the society, of course, plays a very, very vital role in your actualization of that goal. If the society does not see the need to send those kids to the school, automatically there's no amount of sermon you will preach that will even matter at the end of the day. So you will the situation, the outcome will be that that child has been denied of the first right I mentioned, which is that of access, which is unfortunately a very, very fundamental one. Then the resources, how well are our resources inclusive? Sometimes these our resources, of course, breed a lot of bias in our classes. I used to say this everywhere I go. Sometimes it has a way of making a, a student feel less of himself. Now imagine coming to you are doing an example and you say a nurse is always a woman. The guy want to be a nurse. If that is his dream, automatically you will feel so I'm less. Society, there's a way there's a way it impacts his sight and his ability to think that what he has earmarked in life to do is self-fulfilling, because of that stigma that he will get with that. The next slide, please. Which is basically talking about why inclusion in the first place. I know they've touched on this, and I don't want to stay here, please. But I just want to pick one or two things to talk about here. Globally, it says 1 in 5 children, adolescents, and youth are entirely excluded from education. We have diverse reasons for this, even in our country. We cannot exhaust the list, but it's a fact and a reality. So we have to work towards ensuring that everyone is included. Now, children with disabilities continue to be disproportionately excluded from schools. Some of them are seen as a tool for economic survival for their parents or guardians. Some are just left as not too good to learn. Remember, I said earlier, there's no child that does not have the ability to learn. Next slide, please, Bukola, because I know a lot have been said on this. Now, this is very important, please, and let's look at it very, very critically. It says, inclusion serves every learner. Inclusion serves every learner, and not just those excluded. Remember, I started with 3 rights. I termed them inclusive rights, 3 at the beginning of this presentation. What this means is that you don't only look at inclusion from the angle of out of school children as the only ones who are excluded. Those in your classrooms, how well are you taking care of them? As long as you are not meeting their learning needs, as long as you can boldly say these ones are slow learners, and you are doing nothing about it to bridge that gap, automatically you are excluding them. So our classroom is supposed to serve these categories of learners to the best of our ability. Now there are various reviews, research that support this thing. The Princeton review, of course, say when children are included, they demonstrate gains in empathy, they learn empathy very well, soft skills, and cognitive skills also is improved. A good example, I've visited the Kenya school, which is an inclusive school, and they have a lot of children who have hearing impairment. And what the school did is they adopted what we call a whole school approach, thereby ensuring that sign language is being taught in that school. No matter your learning it, you must learn how to do sign language. I was shocked when the principal took us to the field where kids were playing football, and he said, "Can you identify who among these has a learning need?" Honestly, we could not point out who is who until he has to call us. And to my greatest surprise, the captain, the guy leading the team, was actually has a very impairment. And it's so wonderful. So that, of course, those children who are normal in our context automatically don't need to be taught empathy. Automatically, they see these people, they relate with them, and they flow very, very well. When environments are intentionally designed to reduce barrier, all learners can engage in rigorous and meaningful learning. That same school, I went to the lab to see how they carry out some practical. And these students were grouped. You will not even know who is who. And see them engaging using sign language and lots of more. That engagement was so deep that we are lost. So this is what inclusion, of course, can do for our learners at all levels. Next slide, please. The rest are there. Look at it. I have to be skipping because I believe they've done this. Now, there are basic requirements for inclusive education practice. I know the list is, you cannot exhaust this list. These are just a few points that I just decided to bring out, and I feel we have to look at some, maybe a little bit technical. I will try to break it as much as possible. Number one is we must deliberately put in place system that will deliver high quality, inclusive, and accessible education. What that means is that we should provide a high quality teaching and learning environment, including those that are accessible, inclusive, and flexible. Flexibility is the keyword for me here. Of course, that will support student development and allow them to be successful in life. So that should be behind our mind. Then the second one is of course, we're talking about being intentional in promoting student participation and belongingness in all learning, not just learning, and social activities. Whether it's in our curriculum, we should make sure that every category of learner is involved in the learning. Ensure that you pair up activities. Recently I did a training on one of our new course, and we have people there who are visually impaired. We have teachers there, and these are teachers. What we did, we printed the same manual in braille version. We also have sign language interpreters to take care of that category. Now, when it was time for activity, we didn't separate these categories of teachers. We brought them all together, allowed them to participate. The first group, of course, the one that presented on behalf of the group was a teacher living with disability, and you will not even believe it. So this kind of stuff we do, of course, automatically help them boost their confidence, make them feel belong, and make them to even learn very, very well. Third one is also very important, and it has to do with this demand power. So we should constantly think about supporting high quality personnel, that is our teachers, and pay attention to all their professional development needs as school owners. As teachers, we should own our professional development needs. Please, we should not leave it to the government alone. It is not the government. On your own, carry out research and find out what is in vogue. How can I meet every learner in my class? And that starts with empathy. If you add empathy to your work as a teacher, automatically you have a body for every category of learner in your class. That will push you to go wide and everywhere you can go, every collaboration you can do to ensure that you have all it takes to meet that need of your learner. The fourth one, and I know Bukola is a champion of this, is to look at the role families play. Families, experts, and those who are engaged in decision making, what role do they play? We must value the family of children living with disability. We must respect them, respect the children for what they are. And that, of course, you agree with me, will breed what? Belongingness. And they will feel they are stakeholders. You cannot do this alone as a teacher. Remember that you don't have all it takes. The parents of these children can be a support system for you. So as from time to time, ensure you factor them into whatever you do. And we also talk about implement evidence-based cultural responsible MTSS. I believe we know what MTSS is all about. MTSS, of course, is another way of saying that you use evidence-based method in ensuring that these learners are learning. Some of these using of social emotional learning cell, that is an evidence-based, using of universally designed learning, the UDL that all of us are aware of. Then we have what we call academic skill benchmarking, even progress monitoring. All these are means to which you will achieve that. As a teacher, MTSS in class, of course, begins with you assessing the skills of everyone in your class. That will help you to proactively identify who may need additional support in any area that you are managing or teaching. So that is very, very key and important. I will move to the next one, of course. Also, it's very important that we practice what we call old school approaches in dealing with such issues, such as the UDL that I mentioned, MTSS, of course, positive behavioral intervention and support. You know, positive behavioral stuff is a school's system thing, of course, that focus on safe or supporting a safe environment for all learners. Of course, that way you will be able to address their both social, emotional, behavioral, and also academic needs generally. So that process should be on whole school stuff. I did mention something about the Kenya schools, where I said they adopted that whole school process, and they are achieving a lot of positive results as we speak. Next slide, please. Who is responsible? We have said that, and I will not spend time here. But look at the middle one. As teachers, please, we must be innovative in our pedagogy when our teaching process. Of course, we should make sure that at all point in time it is inclusive, adaptive. It's not just enough to think it is inclusive. You must make it adaptive and engaging. Of course, the place of collaboration cannot be overestimated at any point in time. Next slide, please, Bukola. I know you're giving me signs, isn't it? Now, there are two documents before you. I am not sure who have seen this document so far. I was surprised. In fact, if I have another word for surprise, I will use it. That even those at policy level, when we are trying to review a training material, we ask simple questions around knowledge of this stuff. Now, the first one is National Policy on Inclusive Education. I wonder how many in this room have seen this document. Second one is Disability Inclusion Assessment and Diagnostic Tools. Help you with various practical steps on how to handle disabilities or children with disability in your class. Now, if you don't have it, you've not seen it, We will sit down here and blame the government for having policies and the government is not implementing. By the way, the government is not supposed to implement policy. You and I are supposed to implement the policies. And I want us to shift away from this idea, pointing finger. Now, if you've seen the inclusive education policy, which was reviewed last year, there are fantastic guides in that document. It gives a clear definition of what an inclusive school would look like. How can inclusion be created in the class or in a school? Objective of the policy itself. And the most important one, it spells out every responsibility of every stakeholder, from government to the teacher to the parents. Please, if you've not seen that, meaning you have not taken your development personal, please try and go through and get that document and look at it. Now, in British Council, move please, Paula. We have a course which we call inclusive pedagogy. Now, apart from supporting the government in developing this document, we also host annually what we call inclusive education conference, where we bring stakeholders from all states in Nigeria to come and discuss the common issue that affects learning, that affects the three rights I mentioned: right to access, of course, to make progress, also right to learn. What are the challenges these states are having, and what are what of it? So the question we started with: what level of awareness exists about the policy itself? What are the strengths? Now, if you don't know that it exists, of course, you won't even know what are the strengths and weaknesses. What skills are important to include in the new course? So the essence of the whole exercise is to see how we can make the training material relevant to our current challenges as a nation. That was why we engaged in stakeholder mapping to gather such data. Next slide, please. Yes, so this is the sample size of all that we engaged. Total of 993. Next slide, please. Color. Awesome. Now look at it. 23% of that number are aware and familiar with the policy. Only 23%. 40 are not even aware. Aware but not familiar, meaning they know that there's a policy, but they've not seen it. They don't know how it looks like, what it looks like. Not aware at all, 25. Not aware of policy even at all. Not aware of the revised one is one. Not aware of the policy at all, 12. And these are the people who are leading, either at the structure policy level or implementation level. How then are we expected? How are we supposed then to perform the magic we're talking about here? So we must be deliberate and conscious in our search for knowledge. Please, next slide. I think I'm rounding up quickly. So of course, look at what it says, children with the greatest barrier to access, according to our survey. They say number one, there are two major groups: those with special education needs and those living in poverty. Of course, others, from our review, and others in nomadic children, those less familiar with English, and which is why the discussion of language. Now, language is a major barrier in terms of inclusion. A lot of learners are excluded because of language. And that's why this year, hopefully, we are trying to look at the effect of language in our inclusive education conference. And I hope we are going to have robust conversation on it. The next slide, of course, we talked about the various skills that the teachers need to learn. And I hope this will be shared. And I don't know how it is, not just understanding inclusive education, identifying and supporting. Now, we are not saying that as a teacher, you must be a medical practitioner today, but there are simple skills that you can, use or develop that will guide you in order to manage learning across these various learning needs in your class. So these are the skills that our course cover, which the course is called Inclusive Pedagogy. Now, if you go to the next slide, you see some of the benefit of that course. Some of the benefit of that course, of course, we ensure that the course align with the broad definition of what inclusion is, of course, according to the revised national policy on inclusive education. It also gives participants understanding of why inclusion is even important. key issue related to inclusion and the impact of exclusion, foundational concept, and how this relates to what everyday practice. Then practical strategies to use in classroom, whether to address SEN or also or to address the common phenomena in the public space, which is large class sizes. So all these are well covered. And above all, at the end of the course, we also encourage our teachers develop a can-do attitude, of course, which is very, very important. Instead of shifting blame, looking for technology devices that we know may not come, how can we manage it with the little resources we have at our disposal? Of course, all we are looking at the end of that course, the next slide, is so that they will have a solid grounding in background, definitions, issues, and key concepts of inclusion. And also we hope that they will develop a broad understanding of SEN on which to build more specialist knowledge, clear message that inclusion is everyone's responsibilities. I know that has been mentioned several here. The most important one, to develop strategies and confidence to put into responsibility and practicing those strategies and maximizing the confidence level they've acquired because of their exposure to the course. This is very common, important. The last slide is who policy. There's always this break, there's always a gap, a breach that we need to close as practitioners in this room. So we must be able to link the policy to practice so that we will be practicing the policy. If we don't have the policies, so we should start by going through the Federal Ministry of Education website. It's a wonderful document that British Council supported the government in developing. In the policy alone, you have a lot of steps and strategies on how to implement at least inclusive education at your level, the minimum. Please and please, let us not wait for the government to be the bridge builders. We as practitioners, we should build this bridge and see that every child is carried along and no child is left behind in our classes. Thank you very much. I hope I am not too fast anyway, trying to stick to the time. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Jatao. And you can follow Jatao on LinkedIn. It's Jatao John on LinkedIn. Thank you very, very, very much. Like I said, British Council is championing this course on inclusive education in Nigeria. So like he has rightly said, you can go to the website of the Ministry of Education and download that policy. I've put the name of the policy in the chat room so that you can for it. Even if you Google it without going to the ministry website, you will see it and you can download it. There is the full copy. There's a condensed copy about just a few pages. So, and if you go through it, I'm sure that you'll be able to have more knowledge on all the things that we have been talking about in the past 2 days. Okay, let me remove this. Once again, please help me appreciate Jatao for what he has done, although he went above his time. Okay, thank you, Jatao. He was supposed to come on yesterday, but I mean, he was in Bayelsa yesterday and there was no network in Bayelsa. And today, I think he's in another part of South, and that was how we're able to catch him, you know, to give his own words, his own speech as regards inclusive education. You know, I just don't want this to come just a few of us. I want us to see, you know, from the teacher's perspective, from the NGO perspective, and also from multinational organizations, what is being done about inclusive education, so that you don't just think that inclusive education is just one fancy idea in somebody's head, but there are several things that have been done, you know, in the works that we don't even know about. You know, let's even start from the policies, the legal documents. Let's talk about the learning, the resources that are available to you. Most people are not even aware of the resources that are available to you. and what you can do about it. I mean, I saw two questions in the chat room. Someone said, all about a student who can answer questions correctly orally, but the child cannot read or write. So you may want to get that child tested, whether this child has dyslexia or any other. But, like we said, you cannot just by, as a teacher, or an advocate, diagnose. Is not in our place to diagnose. So you have to get this child tested to be able to know, okay, what are, the disorder, the learning disorder this child is exhibiting. Then when you know what the child is exhibiting, you'll be able to know how to handle it. And someone said, oh, is it right for a child who cannot read and write, but can answer all questions orally, get first position? Well, that will depend on the school's policy on inclusion. But I must say this, that that is the definition of equity, like in the instance in some modern schools today, you don't really see them do first position, second position. They give scores like A plus, because they are removing the edge of, oh, first, second, third. However, I mean, if this is how the child is able to be assessed, why can't we assess the child that way? Those are the kind of differentiations that and that are putting in place to help children who have disability in the classroom. Okay, so let me not get ahead of myself. I want to ensure that we finish, on time. So I'm going to bring on the next speaker. Her name is Rhoda Odibo. And it's recorded, but I can assure you that it will be well articulated. So who is Rhoda? Rhoda is a global educational practitioner supporting holistic education transformation programs across Africa. She is a curriculum theorist, social and emotional learning and inclusion strategist. So she is serving as head of Africa Programs Kizazi, a global nonprofit supporting local nonprofits across Asia and Africa to design, implement, and codify breakthrough school programs. She's also the vice president, Professional Association of Curriculum Theorists in Nigeria. That is PACT-PIN. Okay, she's a founder of the Learning Craft and is an enterprise supporting government education institutes. All right, so let's listen attentively. Thank you.
Room. Every single educator joining barriers, embracing inclusive education in Nigerian schools. Thank you for joining. It is my pleasure to have you on here. I hope you're already having a wonderful time today. And this topic is very special to inclusion and the practice of inclusion or inclusive education across the globe. It is not just a Nigerian story or need, it is actually a global need. So what you are experiencing today includes what you need as a global or globally competent educator. Well, we're more focused on our own context, which is Nigeria. And so we are going to be breaking barriers today. And I'm hoping that one, that you pay complete attention, and two, share your thoughts, share your comments as you continue to listen and learn. I always say it this way, that I am a lifelong learner and I'll continue to learn. And so please bring that spirit, that vibe into our session today. So we'll be embracing inclusive education in our classrooms today. and we will be taking all that we are learning today into our everyday practice. My name is Rhoda Odibo. You must have heard a little bit about me, but I will share a little more. Before I share, I want that I would love that you connect with me everywhere. I have my digital footprints all around, and I would love to make friends with as many of you. My name is Rhoda Odibo, as you see at the top, on all platforms, on Instagram, on X, formerly known as Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Threads, or wherever the social media spaces that I am on, which is on X, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Um, I am Rhoda Odibo everywhere. So connect with me, and I love to have educator friends on social media space. So let's connect. I have done a bit of work, as you must have heard, currently leading, of course, leading our Africa programs in a nonprofit called serving as co-founder and president of the Learning Crafts, an education organization that works around the continent to support and professional development and curriculum. And I have done quite a bit of things in my life, which are the number of things below the screen, of initiatives that I've led on our social emotional learning program, curriculum coordinates academy, and of course, an academy that raises exceptional teachers. If you'd love to know about that, you know what to do, just reach out. And we're going to dive in really quickly. And before I dive in, I just want to really say this, that what you're going to learn today, just scratching the surface. Anybody who wants to know anything and be deep, have and strengthened practices in inclusion and inclusive education, this session we're having now would never be enough. It has taken us decades to continue to build our competencies and our skills and our capacity to build inclusive models around the world, particularly in our continent, but even much more in our context, which is Nigeria. So you'll be hearing snippets, strategies, tips, and and things that you can really do. But I implore you that you seek hands-on comprehensive training for this to really truly land. Here, you're going to get as much as you can that you can begin to implement tomorrow. What's our content? So we're looking at 3 different areas. So it's going to feel a little bit like a rush, but please follow me through, because you will get through everything that you need. And don't forget to drop any questions you may have at any point, and then we'll respond to them in the comment section, okay? But feel free to do that. What will we be covering? We're looking at differentiated instruction. I'm going to dive into the meaning, because we can't do that. Like, that's unpacking that in itself a lot. What you'll be seeing is us trying to give you tips of how we can teach the diverse learning needs, right? Where you just methods, a little bit of method to meet all learners. And we'll give you just simple examples here and there. We'll also be looking at universal design for learning. People take courses on this. Course on UDL alone, but we're going to be touching base with UDL, which is the multiple means in which students should be engaged in, which helps to enable them to access learning, right? So it's really accessible learning for all. And what are the things that you can do to implement UDL principles so that all students can be engaged, understood, and all of that. And then we'll be looking at classroom adaptations, small assistive, or even low cost technologies that enable you to have tools that you will use to support students with disabilities in your classroom. Why are we breaking barriers? We'll answer that question. But the entire thing about this topic, breaking barriers, is really, really, truly about what are those things that stop our children, our students, from accessing education. By the way, not just education, but quality education. Those are the we want to break. We want to break them along teaching methods, learning methods, along design methods, and along tools and technologies that we can quickly use and adopt in our environment to ensure no child experiences any barrier to learning. And that's what inclusion is really about, as you must have been hearing. Now let's go right into it. But before we do, I often want my teachers and educators and everyone who is in a space to share, what is one thing you're grateful for today? What are you grateful for? No matter how big or how small that is, put in the comment section what you're grateful for. Take a moment, right now to think through it. What is that thing that you're grateful for? I find that gratitude is a gift to humanity. With gratitude, people find peace, find contentment. And that's why it's a skill that we teach today. As you please put in the comment section, take 30 seconds to reflect. What is one thing you're grateful for? Put that in the comment section. And as you do that, I want this question to resonate with you as well. What is the reason why you are here? Why are you in this profession? Why do you teach? Why? I know why I teach. I used to think about it so many years ago, and it just occurred to me one time. I have multiple reasons why I teach, of course, but one of the things that came to mind was every time I teach, and someone, a student particularly, says, that light bulb moment. Now I understand. My goodness, I get butterflies in my stomach. So I realized that gives a high, natural high, that I see myself wanting to continue to do that for the rest of my life. I always say this, but I'll retire as a teacher, and I'll still go be in the classroom until my legs, my knees get tired. Why do you teach? I want to also see that in the comment section. Why do you teach? Take a moment to write it. Because it matters. It matters to how you do your work every day. It matters to how you engage with your colleagues, engage with teachers, with students, engage with parents, because it's meaningful, it resonates. You know your why, as we say in these days. Why teach? These two questions are my beginning questions, and I would like for you to reflect closely and, of course, write them in the comments. Or if you write them in the comments if you're listening on YouTube, write it down somewhere in your notepads. And I hope you have your notepads ready so you can take some tidbits out of our session. And I'm going to I have 20 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes to do this. Maybe 15 minutes to do this. So we're going to have to look at how we're engaging. And it's going to feel like a rush, but never mind. You get as much as you need to get. Breaking barriers. What are some of these barriers? What are they? What are barriers to inclusive education? We have internal and external barriers. That's what you see on your screen. But the one I want to focus on mostly is the barrier of untrained teachers. Because one thing I've learned is teachers have the capacity to transform their classrooms when they are empowered with skills, when their competencies are there, when they know what strategies to, when they are able to unpack it. And it can only come, teacher is super trained, at least gets trained. That's one barrier that we are here dealing with. We don't want this barrier. And so the barrier of untrained, the internal barriers that we often see is of untrained. That's what we're trying to solve here. There are a host of attitudes. You see a child with disabilities, you already tag them as having spiritual issues. That's a barrier, and it also has physical implications. And there are a host of others. And we can't go into all of these things. You need to come back and get yourself into a very solid, comprehensive program of inclusive education practices and training. That needs to happen. And how can we overcome some of the barriers? Again, we're only purely focused on teacher development. And that is why we're here doing what we're doing, because the barrier of promoting teacher training is what we're doing right here to overcome it. And that's what we're going to focus on right now. And why should we break these barriers? I think for me, it's these three big reasons. That all children have equal opportunity to learn. That's why. As a child, it has cerebral palsy, it's autistic. As a child living with dyslexia, or living with autism, as we prefer to say. Or a child finds it difficult, has a difficult background, comes from a very poor home. Does that mean that child shouldn't learn? That's why we should break the barrier. Does that mean that child shouldn't have access to quality teachers, quality teaching, good environments, accessible environments, learning environments? No. This is why we should break it. Because the child did nothing wrong, but just was born. Another is why we break barriers is so that we can do more with our human self to foster social and emotional growth. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to just looking a little bit on holistic education. And then the larger, wider society one, which is to promote a more equitable society, a society where every one of us is heard, every one of us feels and knows that they are valued. Our conditions don't make us. No, they don't. And that's a myth that we need to bust. That every society that cares for everyone, a society that makes everyone feel that they're valued and they belong to, they have a space of belonging. And a society that fosters inclusion, that we cannot go to our churches, our mosques, without having access to people on wheelchairs. That's why we should break this barrier. So we're going to go right into it to embracing some inclusive education practices in our schools. And please take a lot from this. I put this slide here really just because I wanted to touch base on what education really means. What does it mean to educate a whole person? Because the last time I checked, we don't just go with our academic or our cognitive part of us to school. We go with our emotions. We go with our bodies, our physical self. We walk, we use our hands. We go with ourselves and the interactions that we have in our school systems. So we are social people, emotional people, physical people, as well as cognitive people. And that's the whole education of the whole person, whether it's a child, as a whole child education, or adolescent, as whole adolescent education. That's what constitutes holistic education, because it looks through and through all aspects of a person, their mental aspects, their identities, their academics, of course, and all the other things that matter. That's why I put the slide here for us to take us a moment to pause a little to know why we are in education and what education truly needs to speak to. That's what this. And then that brings us to even now understanding why we must have all of these strategies. So we're, like I mentioned earlier, 3 areas. We're going to look at differentiated instruction. We're going to look at, and like I said, we will not delve into the meaning of this. It's purely just what are different ways we ensure that students learn, different types of instructional strategies that we use to engage with learners at the different levels that they are in. And so we're going to look at them. Some strategies that we can adopt and adapt, to meet the needs of all the learners in our classroom. You and I know that learners all come at various levels. So let's look at some of them. Now, there's a lot here. Not everything we would go through, but I will just touch base with each one of them. I thought that, it'd be important for me to go through the entire spectrum of our education system to see, okay, we have early childhood education teachers, we have primary school teachers, we have junior secondary school teachers, we have senior secondary school teachers here. So I thought it was important for us to give, some strategies here and there that touches base with everything. So let's look at some ways we can use differentiated instruction, promote inclusive education in our classrooms so that we break all barriers to learning. At the ECCD level, we can start. There's something we love so much in inclusion, which is phonics with movement. Here again, the body's coming through. And we found that it's very helpful for children with dyslexia, living with dyslexia. For example, you want to teach the sounds. J, jump. You don't just j, you actually jump as they say the sound, because the physicality of the jumping helps them to recall the sound. Because activities and that have to do with our body, something we call the body mind, is activated when we use the body in addition to the learning that we have. Same thing for clapping. So when you clap when you make that sound, it helps. Okay. Then at also this level, we can use we could some tiered worksheets. We'll put the various degrees of complexity. So group 1, in this case, be counting objects. Another group can be adding objects. Another group will creating word problems. This is the way we can go about it. Then, of course, some things that a lot of you already know, using bottles, all this bottle covers. Use them. Use palm kernels. Use pebbles, for our mathematics. Let the learners count. Not every time that they must use their mental math. Yes, they will get there, but when they make physical connection with the actual object, it helps. while advanced learners, a little bit more advanced, students who are a bit more, up there, the ones who pick things quickly, group them into, let them start doing work around grouping into tens, and then put the groups back together again. So there's a strategy that we have where, yes, you have differentiated. You're getting some people to count using materials. You're getting some people to group, but then you're bringing them back again. And these are the things that we say, that you bring them back to share learning. Okay, so those who have grouped into tens now go back and show those who were using, when they did not group into tens, how they went about it. At the primary school level, so many strategies for differentiation. At the junior secondary school level, I say this all the time to educators. We don't just tell students to explain. That's because not all children oral. Some children need to see the physicality of what they're learning. Some children need to, draw to make sense. And by the way, there's research that has been covered that tells us that drawing leads to more recalling. So if you draw, you tend to recall that info more than when you actually write it or say it. So again, another way to differentiate is to practice something called choice boards. Let students explore the different ways they can access a topic. Some can sing a song, like the example on photosynthesis here. Some should sing, some can draw a comic, record an audio, a video, whatever it is can happen. Then real life examples of math, what we call market math. Market math, real life examples using like yam, gari, beans. It always helps. Never leave a math class abstract without giving it a real world example. Another one that we like a lot at the junior secondary school level is peer tutoring. I know it works at primary school level, where you put students who I used the word advanced, and that was just a way to describe it. But students who had moved advanced. By advanced, what I mean here is students who have moved ahead of others, right? I used to always have students who come and teach their fellow students. And I found that students did better with teaching their fellow students. I'm sure you have that experience than us, their teachers. Because when a child understands it and explains to another child, it would partly different from the way you, the teacher, will explain it. Because that other student will learn and understand it with at the level at which the students will be able to use that vocabulary, the kind of words that they resonate with. I found that it's always peer tutoring works. So you can have an explainer and a questioner. At senior secondary school level, where they keep growing, come up with debates, assign roles, give role cards. We know what to do when children are shy. Give them sometimes, but make sure that everyone is taking a role, right? Make sure that everyone is taking a role. One is the timekeeper, one is the summarizer, one is, is the one that writes the agenda. Everybody needs to be involved. Once they are all involved, it helps with including everyone. You see that helps with including everyone. Then also scaffold learning. Again, we can go into the world of scaffolding. But like we said, this is really just tidbits here and there. So scaffolding learning. For example, you give templates. I used to give drafts, with a prompt. Now there's a lot around AI, and AI is letting us prompting. Is a skill that we must teach our children, how to write good prompts, because it's how to access artificial intelligence. And the best of artificial intelligence is the quality of this child or the person's prompt. The kind of you give the AI and the quality you give of the prompt you give the AI determines what the AI will produce back to you. So the difference between one who is capable of prompting well versus another is clear in the output that comes out and in the form of what intelligence gives, whether it's Meta AI that's on our WhatsApp or ChatGPT on our phones or on our laptops. So prompting is such a great skill and something you should begin to teach. But also we've been doing it for years, particularly for strong, students that want to differentiate learning. So we have those who, I would give prompts to start their essay drafts. Sometimes you start it and the student is able to continue. It doesn't mean that the student, you wrote the essay, you just helped with nudge, a prompt to start. So sentence starters helps. Extension questions also helps. These things are separate activities that we need to delve into to cover inclusion quite well. And then, of course, always bring in real world problems, right? Like the example that I have here at senior secondary level, when you're in the profit and loss, bring it, make it come alive. Calculate the profit for a tailor making the school uniforms, right? Use local case studies, let's just analyze a crop around. Like I said, I'm not going to go through each one of them because we have very few, short. Now let's look at UDL and some examples of that we can have in UDL, right? So at the primary early childhood education level, again, you can see how sounds and movement keeps coming back. And I cannot overemphasize on this. It's very critical that we use our body and whatever else to lock in quality, effective, long-lasting. As you can see here, again, clapping your syllables. It's a syllable clapping. When you're teaching syllables, it's a clap. Whatever language you're teaching, Igbo, Yoruba, English, whatever. We can see the examples that we have there. Olowo is 3 claps. Olowo, that's syllables, right? Ego, ego, banana, banana. When you see that, using the body is such a powerful tool to get students to learn, especially those who are at different levels and are struggling, because this is the multiple ways of the entire body participating in learning. And then take advantage of nature. Use the things around us, leaves, stones, anything, just use them to teach, right? Use any, always leverage on your environment. Use leaves, big and small, soft and hard. Use anything around you to teach. At secondary school level, we do a lot with, you can do a lot with drama. Now, drama is meant to be only done in the literature. No, with literature, no. Drama comes alive in our everyday living. As human beings, we not only are drama, we enjoy the art of even watching them. And so just imagine that same science is built into learning, right? Because innately what human beings like to do, innately what human beings love to do. So bringing it back into our classrooms and our subjects helps children to access learning, particularly children who are at various levels, right? So this form of multiple designs, multiple representations, multiple forms of engagement is very important. So, for example, acting out colonial Nigeria will help to keep that information even much more stronger, right? Then things like replacing long essays. Again, I have an issue with this. we like making our students write long notes, long essays. To be honest, it doesn't make for the most effective retention of learning. So we need to watch out for that. Bring in a lot of illustration, a lot of graphics, a lot of drawing. As you can see the example of drawing the water cycle. Sometimes that's all they need. You make a mental note and you just put the keywords that they need to explain it anytime they explain it. Okay. And then at the senior secondary school level, they're much more older. Start bringing in real life stuff like proverbs, you can use it to like the example I've given here is you can connect physics to local sayings. For the tortoise's shell is in his house. You can use it to discuss force and the distribution of force. You make those kind of connections, okay? Again, we're not diving in because there's so much you need to cover in this short 2 hours that we have today. Community interviews, very critical, very good for all of us, very good for senior secondary schools. I even love community interviews in the line of work, and I find that it's profound for me in, keeping information, learning more about the people, knowing how to solve problems, and engaging in the ways that will help, deepen some of the practices that we have. And so, for example, get students to survey of the elders around them to learn about climate changes. Because you see, my grandma used to tell me how the climate was in those days versus how it is now. And then the students can then track and say, okay, what year was this? What are some of the changes that we're seeing? And they can document it while they're learning climate change for example, a geography class. Okay, so that's important for us. And then the last bit that we want to learn about is the classroom adaptation. for technology. Now we're looking at children with disabilities, right? Children with physical disabilities that you can actually see. So what are some practical tools that we can use? And I think for this time around, because whilst I can talk about tools and tech, what I wanted to focus on low cost, no cost for children with disabilities. So let's look at this. Let's look at physical disabilities. Children who need wheelchairs. Many times when they come in with wheelchairs, our desks don't fit in. They don't fit in for them. So what can you do? For example, for wheelchairs to enter a class, you can actually create a plan, like we used to talk a lot about. You can create, you can have a movable ramp, made out of pure wood. Put some wood together. You put it over if the entrance of your door has, a leg up, then you can put a movable ramp, a wood, and they'll just climb. The students can come in with their wheelchair into the classroom. But even much more so if the desks are not appropriate. So what can you do? You can just put some cement or wood, just wood under the desks, and it will work. And the child can fit in and sit in and participate in the work in the classroom. So that's a way to ensure that you're including such a student and making them know that they are well adjusted and feel that they're valued, that they're seen, and that their needs are met, and they can be in your class, not because they have on a wheelchair or they have any conditions. That's what we mean by inclusion. These are some of the simple strategies. And then we can, again, with children who struggle with their grip, and I know that some of you know that some children are actually struggling with grip. Again, these are things that we need to deepen and delve into for you to really get the essence of it. Because there are some children who face sensory disorders, and then because of that, then they find it difficult to hold a pencil and grip that pencil. So there's simple strategies you can use. Just put a rubber band, it helps for grip. And use any rubber band. You can use old tires, just tie it around, cut them up, tie it around the pen, and it will help for gripping that pencil. And you'll see that what they're writing is clearer, what they're writing is more legible, just because there's something gripping your hands. All right. And then for children who are visually impaired, including completely blind, tactile letters, tactile materials. When you carve materials into some kind of clay, use glued yarn, can help with tracing, as you can see in the picture. And then, but also a bright contrast helps. Now, this is not actually for the completely blind, it's also for visually impaired. So for example, if you use a blackboard, you always write with a white chalk or the blackened wood, right? Because it helps for low vision. Okay, but this is when there's a low vision, so you want to use that bright contrast. That whiteboard never really helps, but with whiteboards, then you have to have that contrast of black, not red or gray. It will make it even tougher for them. All right. And then for children with and students with hearing impairments, those who can possibly not hear very well, you want to use visual signals. So if you want to say tell them about transitions, we all have transitions, time for break, time for changing of class and all of that. You can use a red cloth, just wave it to signal that, oh, it's time for break. Any visuals to help. Okay, this is again helping them to access everything that's happening, the full experience of being in the classroom is really all about that transition, right? But transition is part of classroom, learning is part of classroom, relationships part of the classroom. Anything that helps them to participate fully in the classroom is very critical for us, right? And then we can also use vibration alerts. I like to tap the table, bump my feet or tap the desk to get attention. Because sometimes they might not hear, but the vibration will help them to know that, okay, there's something that they require to get their attention before you speak. So they understand that works. Now, this is, again, a field of things that we need to delve into them much more. But this is just dropping ideas on you, or you can go and research all about them. And then for children that are neurodiverse, and we can talk about neurodiversity in so many ways, but I just have a few minutes. I'm sure I've gone my time. For neurodiversity, children with ADHD, there's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and children with autism, they're usually quite restless in the classroom and then tend to, have some sensory overload, so they need things, that keeps them, together, keeps them calm, and helps them focus attention. One of them is fidget tools. So to say there's a host of things to do. So, but we're just sharing practical, simple things that you can act on your own and see how you can practice with them and they can help. Fidget tools, for example. Just put some seeds, beans in maybe like a little cloth that you have at home. Just give them so they can continue to play with it, or sorry, use it over their hands, and you will find that they pay more attention to you. Actually, yeah, it does work. So you tie seeds in a cloth and then, for quiet fidgeting, right? And then try to use calming corners. Sometimes they just need time out, because all of the activities in the classroom is just connected to what we call sensory overload. Every their senses are responding to everybody and everything, and it disrupts, how they feel, and then they may throw a tantrum or just feel uncomfortable. So what we leverage on is that every educator should have a calm corner. Just a small space, by your room. It doesn't need to be anything special. In fact, if you're in the public school, it can be just like a nice quiet place under a tree behind your class where they just go and spend like 2 or 5 minutes, and then you can give them that moment, just go there and chill a little bit and come back. You are much better off with that strategy. Like keeping them in that class when they continue to, but as they continue to experience, such difficulty. You don't want that, because it can turn to be one disruptive, and where it's not disruptive, they are also learning. That means they're not accessing the learning or the education or the teaching or whatever it is that is going on in the classroom. It can be there, it can be a small quiet place in your classroom for them to just relax. And you can actually label it and call it your privacy screen, right? Whatever, give it nice names, anything you want to call it. You can be as creative as you want. And so these are some of the strategies that we have. And I wanted to end with this. There is research around inclusion practices and teaching methods, and one of them is really, really about using mixed methods, multiple methods. What we get is um more modalities, and we have found that it has big impact. Now, if you watch everything that I have shared here, you will see that there are multiple models, more models of doing different things. And a recent study that looked at 183 studies that was conducted over 6 decades. That is 60 years. So it's not today we've known that multiple modalities, multiple modes of learning actually has big impact on retention, which teachers care a lot about. I mean, you all care about them recalling and retaining what they learn in the classroom. And that's the whole idea of accessing learning and breaking any barrier towards learning. That's what it is, really. So if you want to achieve that, we know we have a research that backs it, and that it shows that it's evidence that if you do, then you will get to that destination of impact, of retention, of recalling, of then making sure that every child accesses quality education, can learn, and can, build their competencies, their skills, their attitudes, their values within your classroom, because they feel that they are valued. Strategies open it up for them to discover themselves, find themselves, express themselves. And as we know, that now that we even know more, that the more modalities that you use, the better memory will be. So the call here is to keep integrating movements, to keep integrating drawing, dance, and music in your classrooms, because they result in some they not only break barriers, they help children to access learning, and then in addition, for them to retain and recall, then build their sets of competencies and skills and dispositions. Let me end by saying this: you don't need expensive tools. Your creativity is all that matters. So this week, my call to action to you: try one thing. Try one thing and let's see. Because your small steps actually will change lives. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you for participating. Keep your questions coming. And we will definitely respond to all of them. Like I said, let's connect. Let's connect. This I am also that on social media, and then you can reach me out on email, just as you see on the screen, at inquiry@learningcraft.org. Thank you for joining. It's been such an amazing time. with all of you. Thank you so, so much.
Wow, that was loaded. That was impactful. And there was so much to learn. So let's appreciate Rhoda Odigo in the comment section. I've written out her name in the comment section. You can see the right spelling so that you can follow her. That was really, really impactful. So, I mean, and that was able to answer some of the questions that I had seen in the comment section about, the strategies for inclusion in the classroom. And therefore, I'm saying to you that when you go back to the classroom after the break, next week, Wednesday, you are going to do something different. I mean, you are not going to beat that child or insult that child and call that child Olodo or Dollard. See your empty head. Teacher says, they say, some teachers, not all, some say all sorts of negative words like, oh, you this Dollard, as tall as you are, as big as your head is empty. We've heard all that. I mean, we all have passed through school, so you're not going to say that to, kill or reduce or traumatize a child and cause low self-esteem. You're going to understand that there might be a problem somewhere. It's not that this child is just being stubborn or being difficult. This child may have a learning disability, and you as a teacher has to teach this child differently. You need to learn how to teach this child differently to be able to, understand his learning needs and meet them, right? And this video, people have been asking if they can get the slides. You're not getting any slides, you're not getting any material, but you can watch these videos over and over again. And like I said, we have 2 training programs coming up. I put them in the comment section as well. We have one for April on the 23rd, 24th, 25th. It's inclusive education in practice, tools for educators. It's from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. for those 3 days. And if you want to have more information on it, you can send a mail to diary of a SNMI at gmail.com. Diary of a SNMI at gmail.com. And we have another training program for parents, because the parents' role in education cannot be, overlooked. It's very, very crucial to successful inclusive education. So we have that training coming up, Understanding Inclusive Education, a Parent's Role, 9th and 10th of May 2025. And these trainings are virtual training, by the way. So, I mean, your location is not something you have to worry about. Just get your data. And I mean, if your data is fluctuating, you also get the video to watch after the event. And like I said, you can send your questions or your inquiries to diaryofasnmi at gmail.com. I also have my own slides. I said, no. We've had so many. We've gone from Eddie to Adelola's questions to Jatao, now Rhoda. I mean, you're stuffed. If you do anything more, oh, Rhoda is in the comment section. Wonderful. If I do anything more, it's going to lead to information constipation. So now we're going to do something before we go. What is your call to action? What is the one thing that you're going to do as a takeaway from this 2 days training? The one thing, just write one thing that you're going to do differently, one thing you're going to do from next week. One thing. And it's not like you must have a child with developmental disorder like cerebral palsy, autism, spinal bifida. You don't even have to have something so dramatic. Let it be that there are even children, children learn at different paces. So it's people that in your typical classroom, where you have children who are, high learner, the mid, the low. So in that just simple classroom, what are you going to do differently? So put it there in the comment section. Rhoda, do you want to say one thing or two before we close?
Bukola, thank you so much. I think you said it all. You've said everything that needs to be said. I wish we could take all questions. I saw lovely, lovely comments here, and I'm just thankful that our teachers and educators that are here, we're actually following through, and we can tell that there is hunger for more. And so, all I would say is, like Bukola has said, just one simple call to action can make a whole lot of difference. So if we can just take one action from today, from everything you've heard since yesterday, please take action. That will be the only comment I'll say. I can see someone saying I will use drama. Yes, and there was a question around that drama. People, and that I saw that question a long some time ago, that we only have 40 minutes to teach. So how can we integrate drama? The truth is that you can, because drama doesn't have to happen all the time. What you do is you prioritize what constitutes the most complex topic that children struggle with, then you prepare for that topic to be taught with integrating drama. Simple. It's not every day. So that's what I would say. But Bukola, nothing more from me, just to say, there's a lot more that the educators here need to get in-person training for inclusive education to be truly well-rounded, and for them to build their sets of skills, competencies, attitudes, and dispositions for inclusion.
Thank you, Rhoda. Okay, so please keep it coming. Just one action point that you start using. Just one, because if you don't write it, if you don't commit to it, it will just be, oh, I attended the two training. It was wonderful. I met Kola Inde, I met Delola, I met Rhoda, and that is it. What you don't use, you lose. So as you're writing that, let me just chip in this, to round off, since I can't take my own slides again. I'm going to finish on advocacy. Part of what I want you all to go back to your schools, home, community is be the advocate in your community. Don't wait for an NGO or the government or the health center to advocate for persons with disability. In your own little way, right? Do a little research. All the information is on Google, or you use all the AI tools that we have, at your fingertips, and learn about simple, like common disabilities or learning disabilities that we have in the classroom, and teach your students on empathy, on acceptance, on inclusion. I mean, during the assembly, we had the opportunity to just have a cardboard and talk about kindness, and talk about, children with disabilities. I've written several storybooks, and unfortunately, you may not be able to get the storybooks. However, there are tools that you can use online, pictures that you can use. If you post a picture, if you get a picture, you print it on A4, post it, stick it to a cardboard, and write something about, disability there, about kindness, about acceptance. And on the assembly ground, you talk to the children, about children with disabilities, how they should discriminate, how they should show kindness. You tell them that it is a medical condition. They should not call them names like imbeciles, dullards, they shouldn't use such cruel names to describe persons with disability. Another thing you can do in the classroom is, for those that write with their that they use their right hand to write, you could actually tell them to put their pens or their pencils in their left hand and try to write, and they will struggle. So when they struggle, you use that to communicate to them about, having a disability, how someone has to go the extra mile to learn what they, are just comes to them naturally. You could tell them to close their eyes and try to walk in between the desk in the classroom, and you see that some of them will hit the desk. You could also use that to, speak to them about showing empathy, and you could tell them, that when you do this, you spread love, you make the world a better place, and you sow good seeds even into your own life, because when you are kind to people, it also makes you feel good. When you do kind acts for others, it makes you feel good. So apart from teaching and, using these tools that we are teaching you, first of all, we have to break stigmatization. We have to okay, she went. Okay, Dorcas was off the stage. So we have to break stigmatization. We have to, spread the word that persons with disabilities are human beings just like you and I, and they deserve our kindness. They deserve to be accepted. They deserve to be included in the community. And you could even do projects with your students. They could do community projects, in the community. It's not just visiting orphanages and dropping pure water and packets of Indomie. There are other things that you could do to really change lives. So let's let's take that back as well as some of the action points that we'll do in advocacy for persons who have children with disability. Okay, so I'm seeing different action points here, and I want you to not only write it on the comment section, your daughter put it down there and ensure the next week, do something different. Okay, so I am Bukola Ayinde. I'm the founder of Diary of a Special Needs Mom Initiative. And along with the speakers today, we're so glad to make this happen, and to my friends from Enugu State and others, people from different states. It's been a pleasure in the past 2 days. Follow me on all my social media handles. It's at BT Inde and at Diary of a SN Mom. Okay, so whether it's Instagram, it's Facebook, and LinkedIn is Bukola Ainde as well. You definitely see some things that you can use for your advocacy. And of course, you all have my emails. You can send questions, inquiries on how to move this further. And with that, we have come to the end of this program. It's as though we shouldn't end, but we have to call it an end right now. But don't forget, April, May, we have trainings. April is for teachers and May for parents. Make it a date with us. We want to take this further, deeper, in a more closer environment where we can interact, hear our voices, and speak more and in depth about this very important conversation, embracing inclusive education in Nigerian schools. All right, so this is where I say bye and thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure. Bye. Thank you, Dorcas. Thank you, Sally Joy. Thank you for coming and interpreting. We love you. Bye.